So I want to be talking about GVG now, Goblins vs. Gnomes, and how I would fix some of these cards. I'm not going to be doing any of the adventures because they are way too short. I'll probably just do a full video talking about adventures later. Now, this is of course going to be how I would buff these cards for Wild, and I'm going to pick probably 2 cards per class because there are so few cards in GVG and a lot of the early expansions, unlike 3, which I'll probably do for a lot of the later expansions. Now, due to the extremely weak nature of a lot of early sets and the fact there are so few cards, it's going to be a lot harder than all the other videos, but some of the minions that I would like to change are things like Grove Tender. I think Grove Tender could easily go to like a 2 mana 2/3. Sorry. It would ramp both you and your opponent, so it's not too strong by any means, and just there's no reason it can't be. You could make the argument it could be a 2/4 even, because it also ramps your opponent. This would probably still be very bad, so what if 2 mana 3/4, it's a very big body, it's going to be, you know, just that. It has the downside of also ramping your opponent as well as yourself, so giving it overstated, making it overstated definitely helps put the card more in line for Wild. There's still a world where you never even play this card, or there's a world where it's too strong. In that case, you can make it like a 2/3 before no stats, -1/-1, and that would probably be a lot more fair. But again, it would probably still be bad. Again, there's very few cards to actually choose from for Druid that aren't really terrible or haven't already been buffed. So I want to do Recycle. We've seen Drown actually, which is a priest spell where it puts it on the bottom of their deck. But I think you could easily make Recycle 4 mana. You could maybe make it 3 mana, to be honest with you. But I think at 4 mana, this card would become a lot better. It probably wouldn't still see play, to be honest with you. But I think at 4, it would be definitely a lot better. So now that we're done with Druid, it becomes a lot easier. Most of the classes actually have cards that are interesting. And one of the cards that I want to buff is Glaive-Zuka. In the past, before Caverns of Time, actually, we saw a bug to Glaive-Zuka where it was buffed to have +2 attack in the same patch where Dragon's Breath dealt 5 damage and Swipe was 3 mana. They eventually put the Swipe buff in the game without giving us Glaive-Zuka for some reason, so I don't really think there's any reason why Glaive-Zuka could not just go back to +2 attack. I think this would make the card significantly better than it is now, and it would probably see play with this stat line. It's very, very strong. You would likely see this in even Hunter or any face hunter at all. I love this design for the card. It is just very cool. Sticking on theme with Even Hunter, another card that sometimes sees play in Even Hunter is Steam Wheel Sniper. I think that this card could easily be your hero power also hits a random enemy minion. This would make it so, of course, you want to be hero powering almost every turn, and it's in theme of the card hit of the hero power also hit it being able to target a minion, but now it makes it so you don't have to choose between hitting your opponent in the face or triggering your Steam Weedle Sniper anyway. You don't have to worry about the interaction with something like Tavish or anything like that because Tavish already doesn't really work with Steam Weedle Sniper, so this definitely works. I think this would make the card significantly better and would definitely make the cut in every single Even Hunter deck. Uh, by far, because this is just genuinely very powerful. For Mage, Snow Chugger is one of the most iconic minions in Mage, especially from early on in the game. It is really cool. It's kind of a completely power crept by a new minion, so I was thinking, what if we just bumped it down? Bumped it down to a 1 mana 1/3, where it's very good to be magnetized, of course, and it's still incredibly powerful. I think that Mech Mage could theoretically play this card. It becomes a lot better now that discounts only need to hit it once for it to cost 0, and I would just be a fan of Snow Chugger being a playable card again. I love its voice line, and it's really cool, honestly. Speaking of Mech Mage, we actually have a card. I'm going to talk about a card that was actually buffed in Caverns of Time. Flame Leviathan. It was originally 7 mana 7/7, the same effects with no rush, but I think that you could very actually I don't even I think it hit mechs as well. I think you could easily do this just to all enemies. It would still be a really slow card. It would still be really hard to make it work properly because just like all these like draw effect cards, they aren't very guaranteed, but it would make the card significantly better. It would only hit your enemies, so it wouldn't hit yourself and deal damage to your face or your own minions. And you could definitely see this card seeing significantly more play, going from 0% to 0%, but it's still a buff nonetheless. One of the worst cards ever printed is Bolvar 4 Dragon. It's 5 mana, it relies on being in your hand. It's absolutely atrociously terrible. So I was thinking, how could you make this card better? Of course, you have to tack down the mana cost. I think putting it at 4 mana would be fine. Of course, I'm going to lower the health a little bit just to justify that. And I think that you should give it something like Rush, right? Let's put it right here and Rush. So this card would still be probably very bad. Do not get me wrong. It would still be very bad. But this would make the card significantly better in a lot of decks. It would make it a threat if you were to generate it. If you played this in, say, even Paladin, it would get a metric fuck ton of attack based on your hero powers and mining casualties and things like that. So you could justify it in a deck like that in even Paladin. But I think that Bolvar is one of the cards that should be buffed in some way because it's just such an iconically bad card that I think it would be fun if the card saw a significant overall buff. Cobalt Guardian, again, is one of the same cards that's just so terrible. This card was in Battlegrounds for a little bit and it was terrible, and then they replaced it with what is it? It's the Mech Murloc. I forget what it's called. It's like Holy Mackerel. Holy Meckerel, sorry. And Holy Mackerel actually, but so I think one of the ways you could do this is you tack it down to 4 mana, you lower its attack, and then whenever you gain it, summon a mech gain Divine Shield, I think you just give it Divine Shield to start. It makes it so that you can keep repeating it. Maybe that would be a little too strong, actually. Maybe it should be like a 3/3 or like a 4/2. I think that would probably be a little more fair if it was a 4/2. But the Divine Shield is only really going to pop or be, a thing once a turn. So if you put it at 2 health, it becomes a lot easier to kill for your opponent. And yeah, you can get a Divine Shield every single turn you play a mech, but does that matter if it has effectively 3 health total because you just pop the shield and then deal 2 to it? I think this would be quite fair, actually. I think actually you could do this 3 mana, 3/1. Knock it down by 2 mana and then -3, -2. Again, you would still keep getting the Divine Shield over and over and over again, but because of the fact that it has 1 health, it's going to die pretty easily. You could still make the argument maybe it could be a 4/1. Put it in line with something like Goody 2 Shields. Goody 2 Shields was a 4/2 that would have 2 Divine Shields, and I think this could be interesting. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do Cobalt Guardian this way. I think Light of the Naru is actually one of the most interesting cards that we've gotten kind of ever. The fact that it summons a Light Warden and heals you is really cool. The issue is the Light Warden doesn't gain attack from getting healed. So I was thinking, what if it was just summon a Light Warden and restore 3 health? I guess it would be and restore 3 health to a friendly. Here. All right. I guess and restore 3 health. Uh, the wording is a little off, I will admit. I'm not, Hearthstone has their own way of wording things, but there's no reason why this card couldn't be like this. You would summon the Light Warden, restore 3 health, and then because if you took damage or anything had taken damage, it would gain attack. Another way you could do it is maybe restore 1 health to all friendly characters. That would probably be really good and a little too strong, but that would be another way to push this card if you really wanted it to be good. I think this is just cool. Working around like this makes it so you could maybe play like a Heal Zoo Priest, which we had Heal Zoo Warlock in the past that also hard ran Light Warden. So that would be really fun and interesting, actually, now that I think about it. Another card that I feel like could go in kind of like a Heal Zoo theoretically is Shadowboxer. Of course, you would have to completely rework its effect. I think that old Shadowboxer was a little toxic with lifesteal, yes. So what if you made it so it was Overheal? Deal 1 damage to a random enemy. I guess it'd be like that. Overheal, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. This would make the card a little better. I feel like 1 damage is too low, though. I feel like if it were 2, it would be a lot better. Uh, it would be very interesting, actually. You could run this in like a heal zoo. Like I was talking about, you could run it in even priest. It would be really cool, honestly. And since it's tied to healing the minion itself, it wouldn't be tied to your hero, so you don't have to worry about that. I think this would be really fun, actually. And I kind of wish that this were what they went with the card in Caverns of Time. since they introduced Overheal in Festival of Legends, if I remember correctly. They easily could have done this. Now, so we all know about Swordfish. It is 3 mana, 4/3 weapon that gives a minion +2 attack. Cogmaster's Wrench was kind of a precursor to Swordfish. We've gotten Mech, Rogue support recently with Titans, and it's pretty good in Standard. And Standard, and it was kind of okay in Wild before nerfs. So I think, what if we made Cogmaster's Wrench, instead of being cheaper, because I think that would be a little boring, what if we change it to has +3 attack while you have a mech, so it becomes a 3 mana 4/3 weapon. I think this would be honestly a pretty big buff to this card. It would make an aggro mech rogue that's not really about magnetizing, but more about like more about getting the weapon. It's kind of similar to pirate rogue currently playable, and I think that would be really cool. I really like this card, and I think it would be interesting this way, since it is tied to actually having a mech on board. So if your opponent clears your board and you don't have any mechs, it becomes like a lot worse than Swordfish. But if Swordfish doesn't dredge into a pirate, which does happen, this is better because you could just always play a mech. And wow, it's almost like in the same expansion, there's a mech that synergizes with your weapon introduced. Wow, it's almost like I was obviously going to talk about Goblin Auto Barber. This card actually did see play in Kingsbane Rogue, like way back in the past. Before Roscon's Rumble, Kingsbane Rogue would run a card like this. It would run like Naga Corsair and Tinker Sharp Sword Oil. And I was thinking of Tinker Sharp Sword Oil, but I don't really want to buff that card. I don't think Kingsbane Rogue specifically needs any help. And if I were to make like Sharp Sword Oil 3 mana would probably be a little too much. So I was thinking, okay, what if I killed two birds with one stone and I buffed Goblin Auto Barber to like a 3 mana or a 1 mana 2/1, right? Battlecry give your weapon +1 attack. It's still a mech. It would be honestly very interesting with this. It would play it with the um you play it with the hammer. You could always push it a lot to make it a 1/3, so it's more similar to like Fillet Fighter in terms of power level, which, yeah, is annoying, but it would probably be a lot better at this point. I think that I like the mech rogue idea, and I think that if you just tacked up some numbers just a little bit, you could play mech rogue similarly to pirate rogue, but it would have different strengths and weaknesses, and I like more focus on the weapon, and I think that would be really cool. Wow, who could have guessed? I'm talking about another mech card. Wow, I know, right? Power Mace. I think you could easily just make Power Mace into a battle cry. Let's see. Battle cry. Give a friendly mech +3 or +2/+2, and then say, I don't know, maybe you can make it 2 mana, maybe you can make it a 3/3 weapon. I'm not too sure. I think 3/2 is probably fine. Uh, Mech Shaman never really was a thing to my knowledge, so I think pushing a card like this would be fine, making it like a 3/3 weapon, giving it, a big push to be powerful. Of course, you would have to buff other, mechs in Shaman, which there are very few, but like, this would be a lot more interesting. It would at least give you the alternative way to play it with amalgams and things like that. Uh, and I think that this would be cool. I think that mechs provide a very interesting playstyle because of magnetic that we don't really have for a lot of classes. Yeah, a lot of classes, and I think that like we get mech expansions all the time where every class gets some mechs or things of that like or gets a couple and stuff like that. So I think buffing all these like early old bad mech cards could be quite fun actually. And more in line with Shaman, of course, is Sylphin Spirit Walker. Let's just start with this. Boom. Remove the overload. It's just so bad. I think you could easily put it down to a 3 mana 2/4, and then it's actually very similar to the what is it called in Death Knight? Acolyte of Death, that's the name of the minion, which is a 3 mana 2/4. Whenever a friendly undead dies, draw a card. I don't see there's any reason why Sylphin Spirit Walker couldn't be the same. Uh, Murloc decks in Wild, at least, especially Shaman, don't actually rely that much on card draw. They generate Murlocs very efficiently with cards like Howdy Finn and Underbelly Angler and things like that. So giving like a Murloc Shaman card draw really wouldn't do all that much, but I think that it would still be nice to have as an option for, the class. It would also synergize very well with like Twin Fin Fin Twin, since they have Rush as Murlocs, and that would be really maybe a little good for Shutter Shaman. I doubt you would run this in Shutter Shaman just for Fin Twin, but it is an option. It also is very good with what is it? Murkwater Scout. Oh god, Lushwater Scout. It's the 2 mana 1/3 that gives your Murlocs +1 attack and rush when you summon them. It would be pretty good with that as well because of course they have rush, so they're going to die, and it's going to synergize with Siltfin to draw cards. So when I first started playing Hearthstone, this is one of the first cards that I can vividly remember. I didn't play very long, don't get me wrong, but I vividly remember opening Fell Cannon, and I don't know, something about this effect and the card itself I just have loved. I think that you could very easily, like, say, knock this down to 2 mana, 2, 3, and then at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to a non-mech enemy. I don't see why we couldn't have this in Warlock. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think this card would even see play, but this would be a lot better. It would be maybe okay in like a Zoo Warlock, but Zoo Warlock doesn't really exist. I just think that this would be so interesting, and it would at least like let you play like a mech Warlock, right? Would it be good? No, but it would be interesting. I can tell you that for sure. So another card that, is so cool, but it's so terrible is Animal Golem. I think you could do this very easily is obviously you make it a 4 mana 7/7. Duh. I mean, like, come on. And then at the end of your turn, destroy this minion and a random enemy minion if it's your only one. I think this would make it so the card, again, not great, but it gives the card a lot more usage. It effectively becomes, like an assassinate on a random enemy, so like a deadly shot, I guess, for the minion. And if you have minions on board, it's still a 4 mana 7/7, technically with no downside if you have minions on board. But so, would a 4 mana 7/7 with no text see play? Probably not, right? So I don't really see why this couldn't be a thing. And then, just the fact that the flexibility of, oh, hey, I can use this as just like a way to assassinate like a key target minion. That's kind of interesting, right? Say you have like, two like 1/2s on board or something like that. You could easily trade those off, send this face, and then at the end of the turn it kills two minion, this and another minion. That would be really cool. Obviously, I'm gonna say it again. Mech Warlock would not become a thing just because of this, but it would at least be something interesting that you could do. So then you have Bouncing Blade. I like Bouncing Blade a lot. I think the design of the card is really cool. It's strictly worse than Blade Storm nowadays. So I think one way that you could do that is make it 1 mana. But I don't really think this would make the card actually that good. I think a really fun way you could do is deal 1 damage to a random minion. Repeat until two minions die. Of course, if there's nothing on board, it would just stop. Uh, Obviously. But I think this would be really cool, actually. I think that it would make the card a lot better as like a control warlock warrior card. But I think that you could play this with something like Frothing Berserker, and as long as the Frothing Berserker isn't one of the minions that dies, you can do a lot of damage to your opponent. Now, is that good? No, but it is something that you could do really funny as a meme combo, and some people like having meme combos. I think that this would make Bouncing Blade a actually quite good, anti-aggro spell though. Uh, that being said, it could be too powerful, but I'm not really too sure because, sometimes you just kill two minions for 1 mana and like the rest of their board just lives, and that would be worse than just say I don't know, Whirlwind. If they all had 1 health minions, Whirlwind would be better. I think like something like that. So I think this is like a give and take of is this really good or really bad? I'm not sure how you would make this more fair. I think that the idea is more, you know, more than anything else. Maybe for 2 mana repeat until two minions die would be fair, but I'm not too sure how you would make this fair. I just like the concept more. If you have an idea of how you would make it work more fairly, please tell me below. I'd actually be really interesting. But I think that like the repeat and two million minions die thing is a lot better for the card. Then the last class card is Siege Engine. 5 mana, 5/5. After you gain armor, then he gets +1 attack. I think that first things first, let's knock this down to like 3 mana, and then you gotta take down the stats, something like this, 3 mana, 2/4. And I think that this puts it more in line with something like Frothing Berserker and like cards that are similar in that nature. This would be very cool in like a Skipper OTK with Warsong Commander, which is already what you're using Frothing Berserker for. But I think this would be really, really fun. Maybe you could. Maybe at 4 mana would be a little more fair, but I think this would be really cool. That Frothing Berserker deck is already not good anyway, so giving it a little buff with a card like Siege Engine could be really fun. Uh, I think this puts it more in line with where a card like this would be released in today's game as well. I think that you could genuinely port this straight to standard, and it would probably be fair, actually, like all things considered. Like, what would run this? Reno? Would Reno Warrior actually run this card with like the Razorfen Rockstar? I don't really think so. Like, to be honest with you, Razorfen Rockstar wouldn't trigger this additionally. I'm pretty sure, because I don't think Rockstars trigger from themselves. So I don't see why this would count as +2 attack if from a Rockstar trigger. But if it does, maybe that wouldn't be fair for standard. Maybe you would want to wait till like Rockstar rotated out. But like this is for wild. It's kind of the thing. So I think that this card could easily fit in wild, to be honest with you. One card that was always so interesting to me was Gnomish Experimenter. Draw a card if it's a minion transformed into a chicken. What if you do something like this? Of course, you want to bump it down to 2 mana because the effect is terrible at 3 mana anyway. But I was thinking, what if it was or battle cry, sorry, transform an enemy minion into a 1/1 chicken, comma, or wait, yeah, and draw a card. If it is a minion, transform it into a 1/1 chicken. Maybe this would be a little too strong at 2 mana. Maybe a 3 mana would be better because it's also like a transform effect. It's very wordy. How would you make it word better? Let me think. Okay, what if it was draw a card if minion transforms into a chicken? If not, trans or if not, transform an enemy minion. So what about that? This kind of works the way that I was thinking, but it's a little worded better, and it's a little not 2 mana actually. 2 mana would be way too strong for an effect like this. And then I think you could easily just make it like a 3/4. Like let's be real here. Uh, it's honestly quite interesting now. Draw a card if it's a minion transformed to a chicken, if not an enemy minion. So now this heavily rewards you for playing spell heavy decks. Of course, if you draw your one minion, that's really bad, but that's the downside of having, a neutral transform effect that also draws you a card. You could easily have it, have the downside of, oh, I accidentally just drew my like minion that wins me the game. Oopsie. So the card becomes like a really high risk, high reward card in that sense. Of course, it being, 3 mana might be a little unfair. Let's be real here. Would Hex on a stick that also draws you a card be too strong? Yeah, I'd say pretty fair, pretty much. But, you know, I don't think this card would really see play in most places, to be honest with you, because most decks either that would run this wouldn't run it because they don't want any minions, or wouldn't run it because they run too many minions. So this card would require a lot of like refined deck building to perfectly work. So it is very powerful, but like it wouldn't really see play in most decks. So I think that's actually a pretty fairly designed card. Of course, the most iconic card, I guess not the most, it would be Dr. Boom. The most iconic non-legendary card from GVG is easily Piloted Shredder. I think that you could just knock Piloted Shredder down to like maybe even 2 mana, right? Like in current year, you could make Piloted Shredder something like a 2 mana 2/3 Death Rattle, summon a random 2-cost minion, summon another. I think you have to specify that another random 2-cost minion, so it couldn't really summon itself, but that would be rare, and I don't really see a reason why it couldn't do this. Like, would this card be too strong in today's game? Not really. Mech decks don't really exist, and mech decks that we do have are kind of like more flood garbage that just all gets spilled out, and then your opponent either has to win that turn, clear your board that turn, or you win. So this would be more of like a tempo-ish aggro kind of style, where it would work, not very well in those like board flood decks, I guess, outside of being 2 mana. Rather, it would be better as like you play this on 2 and then you bump something and then you have like a body, which is, in theme for early, Hearthstone cards like this. Uh, Obviously, the game has evolved way past the point where a Pilot Shredder at 4 mana was too strong, so I don't see why Pilot Shredder at 2 mana could not be playable and fair. And lastly, the final minion I want to talk about, or card I want to talk about, is Hobgoblin. This card is actually really interesting. You see Addled Grizzly, the Whispers the Old God card, got buffed, and it's actually quite good now. So I don't really see why we couldn't buff Hobgoblin to, 2 mana, 2/3. Whenever you play a 1 attack minion, give it +1 or +2/+2. I think that would be a little too good at 2 mana, don't get me wrong. So what if it was like, +1/+1, of course, but instead of play, it's whenever you summon a 1 attack minion, give it +1/+1. I don't see any reason why this would be too strong and wild. Like, what would this really be too strong with is kind of what I'm getting at, right? Like, this card probably wouldn't even still see play, let's be honest with you. So I don't see why we couldn't just give it a big buff like this. You lower the attack that it gives, of course, but it's on summon 1 attack, so it's more splashable to a lot of classes that can summon, 1/1s pretty well. And like, yeah, if you really, really, really wanted to push it, you could do like +1/+2. That would be probably really good and probably see play at that point, to be honest with you. But, I think this card could see play at, 2 mana, 2/3, +1/+1. And I think pushing it, if you want it to be for sure seeing play, it would be +1/+2. Now, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think about these cards below. I think I cooked on a fair few of them, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
All right, sleeping after me. Sleeping after me. Sleeping after me. Sleeping after me.